Check. 1 2 1 2. Oh yeah. Happy Friday, guys. Don't forget to say hi in the live chat. Where are you from? Who's ready? Andrew, where are you watching from? Brisbane. What's up, Andrew from Brisbane? Stefan, where are you from? Bernard, what's up, my man? Can you hear me? I can't hear you right now.
You can't hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. I can hear.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
What's up, dude?
What's up? What's up? Okay, so we're just here in the countdown. We got 5 minutes. 5 minutes to go. I do like a little news in the beginning for about the first 8-10 minutes, and then I'll introduce you in.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, I'll just be chilling until you summon me then.
All right.
All right. Hell yeah.
Stefan from Moldova, what's up?
Love it. How's it been, man?
Good. Very good.
Hell yeah.
It's just a short week. Love it.
Oh yeah. It's been nice to have a bit of a breather between July 4th and this week. It's like the first time that I actually got, like, my friends and I had some friends from out of town, we're in Texas, so fireworks are legal.
Oh,
spent a bunch of money buying legitimate like artillery shell fireworks, and it was fun setting them off. Tiring, but very
Sounds
fun.
like fun, man.
Yeah, growing up, I never got access to any of the really nice fireworks. I would like hoard a little black cat, like a little one firecracker.
Yeah.
And like I'd have like 6 of them, and you'd trade them like Pokemon cards.
Yeah. All right, let me see who's there in the chat. Hobby from Polonia, Europe. What's up, my man? I see a bunch of you in the chat. Don't be shy. Say hi. Joshua Fletcher, what's up, my man? All right, guys, less than 3 minutes to go. Don't forget to say hi in the live chat. I'm gonna go ahead and pick this week's winners for access to Keyword Cupid. If you put I Love SEO last week in the live chat, you have been automatically entered, and I'm about to choose 3 of you guys right now. All right. Oh man, crazy hot in Phoenix, Arizona. Joshua. Oh man, how hot is it out there? All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and spin the wheel here. If I pick one of your names, I'm gonna pick 3 of you guys. Be the first to email me. All right, John Wick, where are you? Email me. Bradley Burney, what's up, my man? Email me. Keyword management. Okay, guys, be sure to email me and I will get you access to Keyword Cupid. Be sure to email me at dre@seo.video. All right, we got about 1 minute to go. It's about 104 at noon in Arizona. Woo.
That's pretty hot.
That's pretty hot. It's smoking out there. Woo.
Wow. Love the video effects.
All right, less than 1 minute, guys. Are you guys ready? All right. Ten seconds, guys. 10 seconds.
Hey, time to get it started. No delay. Let's work. Want to see you be an SEO expert. Paul Andre De Vera, steady dropping knowledge. Over 15 years in the game, so he knows all about it. Master the art of SEO, you will be amazed. Time to get your brand off page to on page. Dropping knowledge, legendary for sure. Whether you're just getting started or self-employed entrepreneur. Yeah, let's go. Subscribe to the SEO video show.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the SEO video show where SEO is alive and fun. My name is Paul Andre De Vera, aka Dre, and I curate SEO videos released in the past week into about 1 minute clips. My favorite part of the show is when I get to introduce my guest, and my guest this week is the founder of ClearScope, Bernard Huang. Before we get started, let's say what's up to everyone in chat. Brian, Vinod, Hobby, Joshua, Stefan, Andrew, Enzo, what's up everyone? Be sure to put I love SEO in the live chat or comment below in the section to be entered in next week's SEO giveaway. Tune in during the pre-show countdown next week to see if you won. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Now let's get on with the show.
This is Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. What kind of fruit do SEOs like best? Low hanging.
All right, first with Google News. In a recent blog post, Google shows us how to highlight our customer support methods in Google search. You can add a contact or support page to your website, list support methods such as email, chat, social media, telephone, feature snippets, set up a Google business profile. This is a great way to establish your trust with Google and your customers. All right, is SEO dead? Let's listen to what John Muller had to say.
I think one of the things that people always worry about is everything around machine learning, and that Google's algorithms will get so far as to automatically understand every website and SEO will be obsolete. Nobody will need to do that. I don't think that will happen. But rather, with kind of all of these new technologies, you'll have new tools and new ways of looking at your website and making it maybe easier for you to create really good content, to create clearer structures for your website. Similar to how things have evolved, I think, the last 10, 20 years as well, where in the beginning you would write your own PHP code and craft your own HTML, and it was a lot of work. And over time, all of these CMSs evolved where essentially anyone can go off and create a website without having to really understand any of these HTML and kind of like server-side basics. And I think that evolution will continue in that there'll be more and more tools available, and you'll be able to do more and more things in a way that kind of works fairly well for search engines. And it's not that the SEO work will go away, but rather it'll evolve.
There you have it. We got job security, guys. Our tagline here on the channel is SEO is alive and fun. SEO evolves, right? When I first started doing SEO, I was doing I was a web developer, and at a company, and then I moved into a role into becoming more of a strategic marketer. The role of an SEO changes all the time, so be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to get notified when we go live on the show. On Kalicube Tuesdays, Nik Ranger shows us how to build a semantically driven architecture. Let's listen in.
So having internal links like that are like both informational or commercial sort of intent is a really, really good way of saying like, yes, these are all relevant to one another, but I'm going to have them internally link to these main pages. So we sort of like thought when we're building this out, again, not going too crazy because but just having like a bit of like just having 4 pages. So like if I have a transactional page, I'm going to have 3 pages of different like types of intent that all link back to that. So that's a really, really nice way of like making sure that every single page has been heroed in some way. And again, because like we can be able to see that semantically that they are within the same like entity relationship to one another, it's going to make it a lot more likely that when Google starts to see, be able to crawl and be able to understand this, and it starts to reward us, well, all of that is going to start to become rewarded. Like that's really the logic there, because like assessing where priority goes, like search engines are rewarding you by indexing favorably like your transactional content, and then prioritizing by creating content and internally linking these to the transactional pages.
The search landscape has been shifting towards intent, entities, and clustering. If you can't create a site using with a site structure with intent and semantic categories, you can do it with internal linking. To expand on this idea, Steve Toth posted a video this week to find internal links quickly. Let's check it out.
In Andrew Charlton's arsenal of Google Sheets from keywordsandsheets.com. So I'm going to be focusing on this one, cluster 1,000 keywords for free. In this case, what I did was export their top 200 pages, and I dumped them into column A here. Now, in order to cluster these together, I'm going to have to split the words in the URLs, because if we just do it right now, it's not going to work, and it's just going to group everything into something called other category. It needs to recognize the words inside this URL. So to do that, I'm going to just find and look for a dash. You can see that'll highlight all the ones with dashes, and then I'm just going to create a space here. So I'm just going to do it in this sheet, and I'm going to replace all those dashes with spaces, and now you can see that they're actual words that stand on their own in here. So I'm just going to go and grab the specific function here. Cluster, and then the rows, and then the EN is for doing it in English, because you can do this in multiple languages. And I'm just going to paste that into B2, and you're going to see it go to work in just a second. All right, cool. So now it's taken all the ones with equity loan, all the ones with streamlined refinance, all the ones with investment property, and grouped them all together. So basically what you're going to now know is that amongst these 3 articles on equity loan, they should all be internally linking to each other.
Be sure to grab the link in the Google Sheets in the description. I mean, internal links were a hot topic this week. Let's watch Dixon Jones give us a few tips on creating an internal linking strategy.
Topic linking is great. And it's great for sometimes more reasons than we might think. But the first is that it does meet a needs net mentality. It really allows you to help the user get to understand your content faster. And that's the whole point, really. It also, though, generates more links if you start thinking in topics, because if you've got lake and pond and different things that mean the same thing, and you can read a piece of content and understand the underlying entity, then any variation of that entity still becomes back to that entity. So you can effectively generate a lot more links if you don't tie yourself down to exact mapped anchor text or keyword-based anchor text. And again, it focuses on the content as well. So it's sending all of that information about a particular entity to one page. And that helps Google to turn, I see it as turning your website from a bundle of ideas into a star, where each of the topics that you're talking about are clearly seen in any machine learning algorithm. It can see that exactly where the authority within your website lies when talking about this particular idea or this particular topic. So it's focusing on the content and making the content align very, very effectively with topics and with entities.
Internal linking is one of my top 3 priorities when working with a client. The other 2 priorities I do is when increasing rankings for a client are schema and content optimization. Speaking of content optimization, a tool I use with one of my clients to get a hockey stick results after the June core update is Clearscope. This brings me to my guest today, who we will be sure to ask questions, and I'll address them in the order they were received. Please be sure to hold on and get this thing set up here. All right.
In 2013, Bernard was the growth hacker for 42 floors, taking the commercial real estate industry online and into the 21st century. In 2015, he started Muse Labs, a small SEO consulting dedicated to serving reliable expertise in the space filled with misinformation and snake oil. By 2016, he was on the 500 Startups distro team and helped 500 startups portfolio companies with all things growth. Also in 2016, he founded Clearscope, the market leader in a new software category in SEO called content optimization. Clearscope has helped thousands of content creators from companies like Adobe, Shopify, NVIDIA, Deloitte, Intuit, and HubSpot. Please welcome the growth hacker, the founder, Bernard Huang.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful introduction.
Bernard, what's up, my man? Welcome to the show.
What's up? Oh, dude, I didn't realize you had such great production quality. Count me flattered and floored.
No, thank you. I mean, I first met you, I think it was an SEO happy hour. I don't know if it was a DMO meetup or if it was a Bay Area's SEO
It's probably
meetup.
a Bay Area search.
Oh, Bay Area search one?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, and I first when I met you, then I started following you, and I started watching webinars, and they're packed with knowledge bombs. And I knew I had to get you on the show. Dude, it's like and like I mentioned earlier, ClearScope is one of the tools that actually helped me get remarkable results.
I'm glad. I mean, I'm honored that the idea of content optimization using entities has now become more or less best practice within search engine optimization, but definitely wasn't the case, right? Like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's SEO, as John Muller was saying, isn't dying. It's just evolving very quickly.
Oh yeah. So I mean, what is your response when someone says like, "Oh, is SEO dead?"
I basically give the same response as what John Muller said. I am, of course, biased because it's in my best interest to say that SEO is changing, it's not dying. And what is dead, though, I think is a lot of the historic ways that people have been approaching SEO. So you could imagine 5 years ago, I'm sure we could all agree that meta keywords as a snippet of code that you put into your webpage was dead, right? And everyone would be like, yes, of course. Like, that's not going to help your SEO whatsoever. I think that nowadays it's still somewhat controversial, but you could say that meta descriptions are dead because Google doesn't really care too much about the text that you provide it. It will obviously take a look at it and compare it in the search engine results to what it automatically pulls from your piece of content. But it's very likely to do a better job creating a meta description for you than you're able to create your own meta description. So I would say that meta descriptions have been dead for the last like 2 or 3 years, specifically when Google like took that out from the Google Webmaster Tools as an HTML improvement. It used to be like missing meta description was an error, and then one day it was gone and nobody really like said much about it. But definitely it's continuing to change, and I think that is why a lot of people love SEO, probably yourself included, is that it is this sort of like next level thinking, meta shifting dynamic, and it's one of the most important traffic sources that tons of websites rely on. And if you're good, you can stay ahead of the pack. So I think SEO is very much so alive. It's just that you have to have that growth mentality, always be testing, always be evolving, or else you're going to be left in the dust.
Damn! All right. Already dropping those knowledge bombs. Be sure to keep on testing, guys, and don't be left in the dust. Okay, I need to rewind this a little bit. Okay, Bernard, you gotta tell us, how did you first get into SEO?
How did I first get into SEO? That's a classic story. When I was going around pitching ClearScope in the early days, that's actually my lead line that I would approach other SEOs with. Because as I'm sure everybody here is with SEO, it's not like you grew up and you're like, oh man, I want to get into SEO. You like somehow find yourself doing SEO as a result of life circumstances. So got to say, the era was 2013, and I had just come off of failing at a couple of different startup ideas, from building mobile applications to buying a Dickey's barbecue restaurant franchise, from online poker, all this good stuff. And I frankly was very inexperienced when it came to startups. Dream was always to start a company, do well, make it work, all that good stuff. But the last like 3 years before, like, I ended up just trying a bunch of stuff and having it all fail. So I said, okay, you know what? I clearly don't know anything about how to make a legitimate company. So I should go move to San Francisco, join a Y Combinator startup, because presumably they have a better idea or framework that I can draw from. So I applied to all the companies that I could find on YC list at the time, just all of the Y Combinator companies. And this startup called 42 Floors took my pitiful cover letter, because I didn't have any real work experience at that time. And I remember specifically, I wrote this really stupid cover letter, because it's called 42 Floors. So I wrote and I was like, oh yeah, my name is Bernard. I'm going to take 42 floors to the 43rd floor. And then they responded in 10 minutes, and they're like, all right, let's have a phone interview. And they hired me. And wow. They told me it was a gamble at the time, right? No experience in marketing. I was always the non-technical co-founder within the companies that I had started before. And they basically gave me a blank check, right? A blank credit card or two. And I said, okay, figure out how we're going to grow this company. And 42 Floors, for those that are not familiar, which is probably most of you, is like Zillow, except for commercial real estate. So you can imagine if you Google San Francisco office space, then it would be great if 42 Floors showed up. So I got to try all of the things: paid advertising, LinkedIn advertising, Quora, Twitter, Facebook, all the things. And finally, we arrived at paid advertising through Google and found that was a pretty effective lever. So from there, the natural next step would be to start dabbling in search engine optimization. And that's really where I got my hands and feet wet with the field, right? I started by reading Muse, and I was like, oh yeah, make sure your technical SEO is good, downloaded Screaming Frog, did all the good stuff. But then it was like, progress was slow, and traction was unclear. Mm-hmm. And then I remember distinctly one day, because Silicon Valley is sort of this magical place to a certain degree, where ideas are traded a lot freer in comparison to other cities that I've resided in. Search engine optimization still is a weird field, because basically, if I'm in your industry and I'm winning, it means that you're losing. Mm-hmm. So most people tend to stay quiet about the tactics that are really working for them. But Silicon Valley, you trade tactics fairly freely behind closed doors. And I got introduced to somebody who was powering not all of them, but a lot of like white label services of backlinks that agencies would be offering to their clients. Mm-hmm. So they ran one of the biggest link networks out there. And he was like, hey man, yeah, it's all about links. And I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, let's try that. So I ended up, I still remember there's this field, you fill in the URL that you wanted the links pointed at, of course the target keywords that you wanted those links to rank for. And we started off by buying a dozen or 24 links, and then it worked. And our traffic started going up, and I was like, oh, I see. So it is all about links. Keep in mind, this is now 2014.
Okay, yeah, okay. And that was for 42 Floors.
This is for 42 Floors. Yes, that's right. And long story, really short, it worked until we got a manual web spam from Google, because they were like, hey, we've detected unnatural linking behavior. And then it was like, oh, okay, we're screwed. So the provider of links got greedy, and they left a fairly sizable footprint. And we got a manual web spam, which basically took our traffic back down to pretty much where it was before I started buying links. And the core learning was that links worked. Lots of the savviest SEOs at the time were all operating private blog networks, which, for those of you who don't know, are independent looking websites across many different industries or maybe a specific vertical that are actually all owned and operated by the same like puppet master. And at the time, what conventional best practice was that you would like publish 500-word articles that would link out to authoritative websites like Wikipedia, CNN, whatever. And then the like occasional like fifth to 10th post, you'd drop a link to either a money website or somebody who was just buying links off of you. And so that way you kind of operated this thing that looked like independently owned websites. What people would do, they'd buy expired domains that dropped because people forgot to renew them or purposefully didn't renew them. You go to internetarchive.org, which was the Wayback Machine. You'd basically then take all of the content that the previous owner had published and then just restore it all back and then make it look like the website was completely operational. And yeah, that was the link trading game back in the day, except Google started to get a lot smarter, right? And so people would like use the same, you can imagine WordPress host, right? Like DreamHost. It'd be then in the same IP cluster. And then Google would link together a bunch of similar websites that all look like they were independent, but all belong to the same cluster. So you'd have to like separate those up and get separate hosting. And then if you use the same theme, right, WordPress theme or like CMS, then Google would start to like cluster like similarities of those together. And then people started getting a lot more sophisticated as it relates to all that good stuff. But anyways, that was how I got started learning search engine optimization.
All right. Okay, so you're doing all these backlinks. I mean, you're doing buying backlinks, expired domains, and actually, I feel like a lot of people are still buying the expired domains and still taking that link equity of some domains
approach.
And registering. Yeah. I mean, I think that's still pretty active right now. So I'm curious. So then the lead us. Okay, let's look in the chat and see what people are saying here. We got Hobby over here asking us some questions. We go, hi guys. Roman, what's up? We have what's the topic for today? Okay, today's topic is on content optimization, which is perfect timing because now I'm curious, like, how did this all lead into the founding of ClearScope, which is that created the category on content optimization?
Yes, that is a great question. So after I got the manual web spam and started to help 42 Floors clean that up, which in of itself is just a really annoying process. They're really vague about what's wrong and all that stuff. You got to go back and forth. It was nice because a lot of there were some major investors with 42 Floors that had connections to Google, could help expedite some of the process there. In any case, I stepped away from that and started working on my own startups again. Again, my goal in moving to San Francisco, joining a Y Combinator startup, was to work eventually on my own startups. And I felt like I had learned what I needed to learn. But more importantly, what I didn't realize at the time is that I actually got the network. I think if you're non-technical, a lot of conventional wisdom is like, if you're non-technical, then your network is your net worth. Mm-hmm. And it's a very simplistic way of saying, I guess, what is actually valuable is that as a non-technical person, it is really more about who you know and what you can like accomplish with your network. And so I was working on just something in electronic sports or competitive gaming, and it wasn't going anywhere. But being part of the Y Combinator network and 500 Startups network, people were obviously discussing SEO challenges. And every time something like that would occur within the YC or 500 Startups network, people would eventually get around to asking 42 Floors, and 42 Floors would point to me and say, oh, well, you should just ask Bernard. He seems to have a lot of tactics and wisdom surrounding SEO. And so we had clients lining up at our doorsteps like Strava, DoorDash, Compass.com, AllTrails, BuildZoom, like massively fast-growing websites with lots of URLs. And the lots of URLs piece was actually a very important piece for us specifically. And there's still no clear distinction on how people are calling this, but some people call it programmatic SEO. Some people call it large website SEO or directory style SEO. And that refers to more of your Zillow, TripAdvisor, or Yelp, right? You take data in a database, spin it into millions or hundreds of millions of different landing pages, and they act as SEO landing pages for people to enter from search. So that was our bread and butter when we got started with Mushi Labs. We said, okay, our experience is in this directory style SEO, and that's exactly where you want to be in SEO, because you make a 5% improvement to one kind of template that people have, and that could be worth hundreds of thousands of organic visits, because that's the, say, like the Yelp business listing page, right? You make one tweak there and you're right, and that's a massive like lift. So that's kind of where we pigeonholed ourselves and said, okay, Mushi Labs is the large website programmatic SEO like place. And the other interesting component to practicing SEO on that style of website is that it's very test driven, right? It's very, you hear this concept of like SEO A/B testing. It's like, that's what TripAdvisor and Zillow and Yelp, that's what they're doing, right? They're taking, you could think about it, there's like 50 states. They'll take a state and call it California, and they'll say, okay, in California, we're going to make the hero photo that is usually 100 pixels, like say high, and shrink it and make it 50 pixels high or something like that. And then they'll say, okay, within the aggregate of the keywords that I'm tracking within California, you can imagine like lunch in Los Angeles, dinner in Los Angeles, right? What happens to that set of keywords in comparison to, right, the rest of the data that I'm holding as constant? And so you might then start to see some deviation, and you'd say, okay, well, the hero image test failed in the sense that we didn't get statistical significance in ranking improvements. And then you would roll another test out to the state of Texas or New York. And that then basically arrived at this concept of different search queries deserved different criteria and associations, except we got to run massive experiments at scale across multiple different websites in multiple different industries. And what that started then to like lead into was that, oh, okay, well, different search queries deserve different criteria. Search query deserves X, right? So with 42 floors, we found that should you want to be looking for office space, having a picture, a unique picture of each office space that was on at least the front page of the SEO landing page massively improved our organic search results. So that led to then this idea of content quality, right? When somebody lands on your page, and now you can imagine this is like 2015, when somebody lands on your page, are they finding what they're looking for? And we found a lot of pretty closely correlated statistics where if our conversion rate went up on a directory website, that actually netted in better rankings, which at the time was kind of mind-blowing, right? Because people were just like, oh, I just target keywords, build links, and like make sure my technical SEO is good. Except when we drove more conversions, rankings would increase. So a very like interesting example of this was that you can imagine a directory website is like a Craigslist, right? If you've ever been on Craigslist, it's this big old mess of a bunch of listings. And we're like, okay, well, maybe some percentage of people don't actually want to click on every listing. They just want to talk to somebody. So we put this call to action in the directory that was like, too many options? No sweat. Talk to 42 floors concierge services. And of course, you can imagine that boosted our conversion rate because some people did want to talk to somebody, and rankings improved there. And so we're like, oh, okay, this must be it. Like, it must be actually all about content quality. This is exactly what Google has been preaching for the longest time, except the problem, as you can imagine, is that content quality is subjective, right? We've been doing consulting for DoorDash. You point to this like really crappy page that they had with like, 5 restaurants on it because it's like some small zip code page, right? It's like, oh, food delivery in 62103, like 5 options. It's like, this is a crappy page. But crappiness, again, content quality is subjective. So we point to these pages, say these are bad. And they're like, how do you know it's bad? It's like, well, look at it, it's bad. But I was like, okay, I still like, that doesn't compute. So then this idea of using natural language processing to basically objectively determine the quality of a page became this idea, like more of like an internal way to prove to clients that when you have a page that talks about, we'll make it simple, the best credit cards, and it doesn't say American Express or Chase Sapphire, well, it's a bad piece of content, right? And like that's because most people would agree that those are correlated like subjects. So we started doing that, had a proof of concept using Alchemy API, which was the industry-leading natural language processing technology commercially available at the time. They got bought by IBM Watson, but it was like a very manual process where we would go through, we would do what people call term frequency, inverse document frequency, TF-IDF analysis, except using natural language processing instead of just keyword density to then arrive at a list of recommendations. And we did this all manually. And then we just gave that list of terms to our clients. And we say, put these on the page. And that was an experiment. It's like, put these entities on the page. Let's see what happens. And what we found was a significant increase in impression count and a decrease in click-through rate, but an overall increase then in clicks to the page, which is to say that, right, there's this like entity-based matching that Google is doing. And now that you've, like, say in the past, right, you might say, oh, dinner or supper, right? And Google would be pretty stupid 5 years ago and say, well, dinner in Los Angeles is different than supper in Los Angeles. Except now Google's saying, oh, okay, well, dinner and supper can be used interchangeably, so it doesn't matter if you said dinner or supper, we're just gonna like lump those together. But what we were doing is saying, okay, there's some percentage of pages that say supper, and when you then included supper inside of your dinner directory page, it would actually start to capture, right, like supper in Los Angeles because you simply mentioned it. And then this idea then of like, oh, because that page is actually able to serve a wider range of queries, long tail queries surrounding the topic being discussed, it actually then seemed to improve that content's core ranking for the head topic. And then it's like, okay, well, that makes sense from like a concluding of the search journey perspective. And so then we took a stab at productizing that approach, and that became ClearScope kind of 2016, like at the end of 2016.
All right, man, what a story. Okay, so now that we got a background of ClearScope, we want to see what, okay, we had something here. We had some comments here. Zen, Bernard, you are amazing. You are an SEO history encyclopedia. This is amazing. All right. Okay, so we had some questions on what is ClearScope doing then? So what are the tactics, or like what if someone was to do this manually, and how helping out? So like what are some tips for people to like understand what ClearScope is doing to optimize content to get like awesome results, like what I've gotten?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't keep this like secret sauce secret. What we do is you type in a query in ClearScope. This is a step-by-step, right? You type it in, and what ClearScope does is that it hits Google search results, and it scrapes the top 30 ranking pieces of content that are performing for that particular keyword. We then dive into the piece of content, do our best to throw out noise elements like nav bars, sidebars, and footers, because oftentimes those are fairly noisy. So extracting what we believe to be the body of content, we'll take that body content, run it through Google Cloud Natural Language Processing, and we'll also run it through IBM Watson because they bought Alchemy API. These two natural language processing libraries will come back with a list of entities, fancy word for concepts, that their natural language processors have deemed relevant. We'll then merge the two lists together, and this is where the secret sauce is in the merge, and we'll have our own IP that does signal-to-noise processing, because if you just looked at the results that you get from these natural language processing libraries, you're going to find a lot of noise. Right? They're going to say, oh yeah, things and stuff and high quality and good stuff and great way. These are all important entities. And when you look then at the range of content optimization tools as a whole, we like to say that we have the best quality of recommendations on the market because of the unique way that we can then say, great way, like as a concept, not very important, but like leukemia, like very important. So we have our own methodology of selecting which of the responses these natural language processing technologies are returning, are relevant, and then serving it. If you wanted a very high level concept of like how this would work, you can imagine Google scrapes the internet a bajillion times every like second or day or whatever. They're able to say, okay, the frequency of occurrence of a word like privacy policy is like 56% across the known not dark web, right? Just if a website says privacy policy, they're able to then say, okay, privacy policy, should it come up as a term or entity in a web-based world, is really not that important. And then you can like narrow that down in one more field to say like e-commerce. It's like, oh, okay, well, dresses and shoes in an e-commerce based like website or industry class is also really common. So we're not going to say that dresses, should somebody perform a search in e-commerce, is interesting, but dresses, if somebody were to perform a search for, like funerals or something like that, is actually more relevant, right? So there's this like idea of uniqueness thresholds of certain entities based within industries. And that's basically what ClearScope is doing, is that it's saying, okay, there is this uniqueness threshold. Is this actually a relevant term for this particular search?
Got it. Okay. So there are like, ever since you created this category, content optimization, there has been a lot of tools out there, right? That's come out that's doing something similar. I mean, we had a question. We actually got a question here by Brian. He goes, ClearScope versus Market Muse. What is your answer to that?
What is my take? Yeah. I mean, everybody's got their different approaches. We'll just put it like that. And I don't really have much visibility into what Market Muse is doing. I would say that directionally speaking, I like what they as a team have been doing, right? It's sort of like you could imagine within just most business categories, there's like innovators and there's like copycats, right? And I would say that Market Muse has done a fairly good job in continuing to push the boundaries of what AI and search engine optimization are tackling. And I think that from an execution standpoint, perhaps they have gone drank a little bit too much Kool-Aid, because they will invent things that conceptually are sound, but executionally are mysterious, right? Like personalized difficulty. It's like totally makes sense. And this is this concept where if you have a large amount of content that performs well for a given topic, and call it like, NerdWallet and credit cards, then anything NerdWallet publishes surrounding credit cards is likely to A, perform way better, rank way faster, and doesn't actually really need to be high quality because they are a known subject matter authority within that particular thing. So you can imagine like what Mark and Muse is trying to do with content inventory and personalized difficulty is saying, oh, you have a gap because you talked about how to improve your credit score, but you didn't talk about why credit score is important. And we know that your how to perform well in credit score is doing well because it's ranking well. So if you were to then go after this, that's actually like low-hanging fruit, right? The only fruit now. There's that SEO joke at the beginning. It's what kind of fruit do that is low-hanging fruit. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense, but did you have to like kind of make it so confusing to understand? It's like, I feel like their product is grounded in very sound concepts, except executed in very mysterious ways.
Got it. Okay, Brian, I hope that answers your question. We got a question here from Garth. What is your take on how many entities exist to Google for a given topic and the amount of entities that exist in the top 20 results?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the raw number. I'll give you the SEO answer, right? It depends. And then I'll give you the raw number, which is like, when ClearScope parses the top 30 results, we're getting back anywhere between like 10,000 to 50,000 entities for the set of 30 results. So you can imagine like different queries deserve different stuff. And for a more nascent subject, we could say, something that is like just on the cusp of being invented, maybe, definance farming for non-fungible tokens, right? It's like, okay, it's not going to be very entity rich because there's not that much content that talks about it. And then you can imagine for like video-based queries, right? How to surf, you're going to see a lot more YouTube results. There's going to be a lot less entities associated with that as well, simply because there's less text associated with that kind of query. And then for like entity-rich queries, you can imagine these are going to be really highly densely like resources. Like anything in the health and wellness space is usually pretty high, like entity-rich, or affiliate as well. Like best credit cards, very entity-rich because people try to stuff as much like stuff into those kinds of results as possible.
All right, Garth, I hope that answers your question. Okay, we got a quick question here from Hobby. Hobby asks, can you please tell us in a few sentences about, can you please tell us a few sentences about life cycle of Google algorithms? Why they constantly change? What's your take on that? What's your,
Yeah, no, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about this. Really, at the end of the day, just think about SEO, in my opinion, as Google wants to provide the best answer to the searcher as quickly as possible with as few clicks and as few additional searches. That's it. So every fluctuation that you see in the Google algorithm is essentially an experiment that Google has tested, right? That's why you see screenshots of like, oh, did you see this layout? Did you see that the font's like slightly bigger over here, right? Google is literally just saying, is that like, small sliver of like 0.5% of users that I served that, is that better or worse than what I originally had? So they're like, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, whatever, testing all kinds of different variations of stuff. And at some point, they arrive at enough data in certain like variations of tests to say, okay, that test was actually good. So let's roll it out across like a bigger set of users, or you can imagine, let's do an algorithm update. So that's why that's happening. The life cycle then of Google algorithms is basically the end of a lot of different variations of tests that Google is running. And basically they then just saying, okay, we believe this set of variables changing is better for the user. We're going to deploy that. So that's why that happens. But you can see kind of just think of it as Google's always trying to get the user the answer as quickly as possible with as few searches and additional clicks that the user has to perform.
Got it. Love that answer. Very interesting. Okay, so we have another question here from Joshua Fletcher. Correlation versus causation. Are both sides playing the correlation game only? Are both?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really challenging question to answer. People have like probed at this particular question before. You can imagine one of the most infamous is Rand Fishkin tweeting out, hey, I created an article about some made up fictional like name or something, like Google it, navigate over to the right like search engine results page that you find it on and click on it. And then 24 hours later, it's like, look, bam, right? Rank 2, 3, or 4, or whatever, right? It's like, is that correlation or is that causation? And I think that it's user behavior, right? Google is really looking at user behavior, in my opinion, user behavior being clickstream data. And they know, A, that you're legitimate because we've all mostly given Google our Gmails or G Suite accounts or whatever, right? So they're like, okay, this is a legit user. And then they're just measuring everything, right? So like if I Googled, how to bake apples, an apple pie, right? And then they saw me like 7 days later, Google how to bake apple pies on my mobile phone again, and click on another result. Google might look at that and say, okay, well, like on mobile, right, this is a better experience because people have Googled that. And when I served it, I never saw them Google that ever again on any device. So that seems pretty good, right? We're gonna like kind of keep that up there. And then maybe we'll try testing, right, this other experience to say, okay, when result A is number 1 or result B is number 2, what percentage of people click on each one, in what order, how long do they stay, and more importantly, do they find what they're looking for? That's the most important part. Do they find what they're looking for? Because somebody could land on your page, stay there for a long time, but ultimately not find what they're looking for and have to redo a tangential search to then find what they're looking for. So time on page bounce rate are like leading indicators that the user has found what they needed, but the ultimate indicator you can imagine is conversion rate, right? That's why when we optimize for conversion rate on our directory pages, that rankings improved. It didn't matter that somebody stayed on the page longer. It just mattered that they ended their search journey on our content experience. So that's it. I'm going to say that it's all probably correlation, but ultimately Google is trying to find out, is a user finding what they needed on that page? And they're going to use a variety of different techniques to verify that that has actually occurred.
All right. Okay, we're coming close to time here. I'm going to take one more question. We got one from Stefan Ong. Awesome episode, Bernard. Is there a reason you scraped the top 30 and not just the top 10 results?
Oh, absolutely. So other content optimization tools might narrow it to top 10, top 20. We do top 30 for a couple of different reasons. Reason number 1 is going to be that you can imagine topics change over time, right? So what was relevant surrounding COVID today is very unlikely to be relevant 1 week from now. What we're seeing then is that the challenger content is oftentimes on the second page and third page, and there's oftentimes a lot of like search engine flux, right? As Google tries to figure out whether a page should graduate onto the front page of Google. So it's very much so always actively testing second and third page stuff more aggressively than front page stuff, because again, they don't really want to rock the boat too much when it comes to things that they're pretty confident that the user are doing, like engaging with. So that's number 1, is when we actually do the clear scope analysis and we look at the second and third page, we are basically giving you a snapshot of emerging topical relevance that the user could care about surrounding the subject, which A, if you were already on the front page and wanted to defend your rankings, is really quite nice, because then you're introducing relevant terms that challenger content is basically trying to like push you down with, and you're defending against that. And B, if you were trying to challenge the first 3 pages, you have a very comprehensive snapshot of exactly what's working. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is going to be just like entity richness, right? We found that, yes, doing the first, when we look at what entities that ClearScope recommends as a whole, the first page accounts for about 80% of the entities as a whole, like as a term source. The second page adds another 15%, and then the third page adds 5%. When we look at fourth page content, it's basically adding like 0.5%, so it becomes pretty negligible in terms of like additional interesting terms, which is why we drew the cutoff at the third page instead of doing like a second page or a fourth page.
Got it. Okay, we're coming close, very, very close to time. We're actually over time a little bit, or coming close. But I want to ask you real quick. I mean, so what? Before you go, like, I want to see what's your take on the future of SEO.
The future of SEO. Yeah, people will beat this left, beat this right. People will scream searcher intent, user engagement signal, natural language generation, and GPT-3, OpenAI, blah, 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 right? All this good stuff, voice search, whatever. So the future of search is more and more so user engagement signal, which then is more and more so kind of fracturing. Right, is what is good user engagement signal? Well, that clearly depends on what the user is searching for. For example, right, people are using their mobile devices more and more, and voice search is becoming more popular, but only for specific classes of queries, right? You can imagine like, navigate me to blah, or what is the weather, right? And you can imagine Google featured snippets is essentially an answer to a wide set of that type of search on top of what we call like factual content, right? If you're like asking Google how many legs does a dog have, Google's going to say, well, that's 4, right? And there's no need for a piece of content to like go through the etymology of why dogs have 4 legs. It's just like, no, that's just the answer. So we're seeing basically what search engine optimization is heading towards is an even more fractured sort of like field where, yes, for some searches, you can imagine how to X. Video is almost always better in teaching somebody how to do X than text will ever be. So to be good at SEO for a how to X like style query, that means that you need to be creating video, right? So SEO is becoming more and more increasingly like multifunctional because user engagement just varies so much industry to industry, department to department. So that's kind of what we're seeing. If we're talking about what people traditionally view to be SEO, I think we're seeing a fracture there. Number 1 is what we call pure informational definitional content. Like, what is X? Define X, right? So Investopedia, whatever, those sites are pretty much the dominant players in the what is X. I think that natural language generation tools are going to work really well for anything that's what is X or factual, because they're really good at basically analyzing large sets of data and arriving at this conclusion that X is Y, right? It's just like, that makes complete sense. There's really no opinions or subject matter expertise to really need. You don't really need that for that type of query. In terms of then, right, the more of the like topical stuff, right, like the best credit cards or like blah, 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 we're seeing this really heavy emphasis on subject matter expertise come to play. And the best way that I can frame this is like, you probably, some of you have probably done this research where you're looking for the new vacuum cleaner or a new whatever, right? And you type in best vacuum cleaners under $400 or whatever, and you land on this page, and it is this like janky ass experience, or it's like pros, cons, and there's like a stock image, and you're like, okay, I mean, we're all in SEO here, so you're okay, like this is bunk, and then you leave, and you're like, that was a bad experience. Right? So it's more of this like emphasis on trust, right? How can you put this use this piece of content out there and have the user read it and be like, oh, you know what? This seems legit, right? I can trust this. And that's I think what everybody's trying to take a stab at with searcher intent and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, yeah, different queries are going to deserve different stuff, but ultimately, right, when somebody lands on the page, how can they trust the content? That's why you see expertise, authority, trustworthiness, people now saying, oh, you got to link out to these authoritative websites. It's like, yes, you need to do that to back up the claims that you're making, because you can't just simply say, drinking a glass of wine is good, that's it, point a bunch of links at it and expect it to rank. So I think the future is like, it's user engagement signal, but that just means like being really careful about why somebody's landing on your page and what specifically they're there to consume. And if you are like affiliate, you see this in Wirecutter, it's like, why you should trust us. It's like, well, this is exactly what we did. Or, on like actual like other affiliate sites, it's like you see pictures of the guy hiking, through the woods with a hiking boots or outdoor shell. And you're like, see, look, it like broke right here. It sucks. It's like, that looked compelling. I feel like I could trust this guy because he's there wearing it and doing all this stuff on it, right? So it's like taking that idea and extrapolating it across all of the non-informational what is style content, I think is kind of what we're seeing SEO move towards. It's just like, how can you make users really trust the content that you've produced and therefore conclude their search journey on your content experience.
Damn! All right. Okay, we're ahead of time out here. I mean, we had Mother's Community saying we got your show needs to be more time. It's insightful. We got here Stefan on. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Bernard. Okay, Bernard. I asked this question to all my SEO professionals right before they leave. How can someone become an SEO professional? What's your advice to them?
How can someone become an SEO professional? Honestly, I'd say the best way to do it is simply to own or operate your own website. Like, it can be as simple as just having, like StephenOng.com, right? Something like that, where you get full authority to publish posts, like screw it up by pointing a bunch of spammy backlinks to it, right? It's really as simple as like that. And then that's kind of where this like, oh, I see, when I did this, that happened. So what happened if I did this? Like, what would happen there? I think the true like best SEOs that I've interacted with are the ones that have as much experience operating many different websites as possible and running a huge gamut of experiments, right? If you're able to draw from this pool where you're like, oh, well, when I worked at Amazon, we did this test that improved site load speed by blah, and our traffic actually went up. That's like great and all, but it's Amazon. So like your scope of experience is so limited. And then, you end up getting hired as the SEO for a startup. And all of a sudden, you're like, well, I increased my page load speed by whatever, like 200 milliseconds, and nothing's happening. It's like, yeah, well, because you're a startup, like you got built that like SEO from ground zero, which is going to be a vastly different like skill set than running crazy tests at a larger organization or just simply navigating politics. So I think, okay, now like vocalizing that, there's like two ways to this like idea. If you want to be really good at in-house SEO and career develop that way, then I feel like it is more about management, communication, and like politics, right? Because basically you have to convince a bunch of different departments that improving the overall user experience of the site is good and for SEO and business, but for your objectives. So it involves a lot of like, coaxing the right people to do the right things and making sure that nobody on your team screws anything up. And I feel like that is a vastly different skill set than if you wanted to say like, I want to be the best SEO. Then like, I think you should be running your own private blog network. But instead of doing that for the sake of pointing links at your money website. You want to be doing that for the sake of running experiments on different web properties, right? There's like people that are running around saying, okay, 20% of the time when somebody hits back on the browser, I'm redirecting them to the homepage. And I'm like, that seems bad. But it's like, but it works. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I can see why that works if we're kind of like subscribed to this idea that Google's measuring how many people end up on your site and don't come back. It's like you basically sent one-fifth of the people that land on your site not back. So yeah, that should work, right? Or people are gonna go Mechanical Turk, right? And say, okay, Google this. Mechanical Turk is where you can get people to do stuff for really cheap amounts of money on Amazon. Like, go Google this and click on this result, right? But then if they're all coming from the Philippines, which typically, they're all coming abroad, what you'll get from Mechanical Turk, then Google's gonna look at that and be like, yeah, no, it's not gonna happen. We need like real legitimate US people doing it. So then people might have US-based click farms of stay-at-home parents that they're farming stuff out to juice user engagement signal, right? So that's like the other set of like SEO. I think if you want to climb the career ladder, have a great, nice salary as an in-house SEO, that's one thing. And if you want to like be the best damn SEO, I think that's a completely different like skill set.
All right. Thank you for that clip there. Okay, Bernard, I gotta call it the show right now. We went a little bit over, but thank you for staying on a little bit longer. But can you just hold on for one quick second while I sign off real quick?
Okay.
All right. Okay, guys. All right, guys. That concludes another episode of the SEO Video Show. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And I will see you next week. Peace out.
Thank you for watching. Hope you come back next week. Make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss a thing. Hope you learn something new, cause the vibe is incredible. From the special SEO professionals, SEO video show. Let's work. Want to see you be an SEO expert. Paul Andre De Vera helping you step it up. No delay right now. Time to level up. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe. Woo!